During World War II, the men who couldn't fight were often treated worse than the enemy. My Uncle Frank tried to enlist the day after Pearl Harbor happened. He was 22 and felt it was his duty. The recruitment office was packed with young men, some still in their church clothes from Sunday service. Frank waited in line for 6 hours. When he finally reached the front, the doctor took one look at his medical history and stamped his papers with a big red 4F, physically unfit for service. Frank had suffered from asthma since childhood. Walking out of that office was the hardest thing he'd ever done. On the street, women were handing white feathers to young men not in uniform, an old symbol of cowardice from the First World War. An elderly woman pressed one into Frank's palm without a word. He kept that feather in his wallet until the day he died. Back in our small town, people started whispering. Men would cross the street to avoid talking to him. The local diner where he'd eaten breakfast every morning suddenly couldn't find him a seat. His boss at the factory called him into the office and said, "We need to prioritize jobs for returning heroes, you understand?" What most people didn't know was that Frank had tried to enlist 3 more times at different recruitment offices. The 3rd time, he'd memorized a different eye chart and held his breath during the lung examination. The doctor had almost passed him until he noticed the wheezing. Frank found work at a munitions plant 30 miles away. The hours were brutal, 12-hour shifts with dangerous chemicals that made his asthma worse. But those plants had a special armband for workers in essential industries. Frank wore his proudly. One night at a bar, a drunk called him a coward. Frank silently placed his pay stub on the counter. He'd been working so much overtime that he was making less than 3 cents an hour after taxes, all of it going to war bonds. The man never apologized, but he did buy Frank a beer. The real twist came when Frank's younger brother Tommy enlisted and was accepted immediately. Tommy was sent to the Pacific, and their mother would sit by the radio every night clutching her rosary. Frank wrote to Tommy every week, but the letters started coming back unopened after 6 months. It wasn't until 1943 that they learned Tommy had been captured at Bataan. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, Frank had sold his car and donated the money to the Red Cross war effort. Frank started volunteering at the hospital on weekends, reading letters to blinded soldiers. He organized metal drives, collecting everything from pots to car parts. He gave blood so often the nurses knew him by name and had to turn him away. At church, people still avoided sitting near his family. The pastor preached about sacrifice while staring directly at Frank's empty chair. He was usually working double shifts on Sundays. When his mother fell ill, Frank took on a 3rd job.